Hello everyone, my name is Adi, I'm a pro Pokemon player, and today I'm going to be reacting to the Pokemon Champions review that was put out by IGN about a week ago. Obviously, I am very invested in Pokemon Champions, I've been playing it a lot in the last couple weeks, but also, I was one of the people who was very concerned about Champions. In fact, my most disliked video ever came out a couple days before Champions dropped, that I think was titled I am concerned about Pokemon Champions, just talking about how I thought looked like it was going to be very bare bones. And when it actually came out, a lot of my peers, the other competitive Pokemon players, also had like immediate negative reactions. But I think since then, we've all kind of accepted the limitations of the game and have just been having fun actually playing it. But I'm really curious what a non-competitive player thinks about the game and whether they have similar criticisms, different criticisms, or whether they really liked it. And so let's look at IGN's review and let's jump into it. And just looking at the headline, Champions feels like it needs an evolution of its own if it wants to be the very best. So it doesn't sound like they liked it off the rip, but let's see. The idea of a battle-centric Pokemon game that lets trainers duke it out without all the breeding and badge collecting has been around since the early days with Pokemon Stadium, which I never actually played. I played a lot of Coliseum and XE Gale of Darkness, but I was a little too late for Stadium. But it does seem like there's nostalgia for that when I've been talking to people about this game. So it's exciting that Pokemon Champions looks to continue that legacy 26 years later. This free-to-start game, turn-based battler, puts its full focus onto online PvP using the classic combat system. That being said, while it may look and play like Pokemon Champions' lack of substance keeps it from being the very best to battle with your Pokemon. Which is kind of what I was saying, right? I did think that the game felt very bare bones, a lack of features that would impact people's retention, keep people coming back to the game. That's my real concern here, because people already had access to Battle Stadium on Scarlet and Violet. They already had access to rental teams so they could use the best teams in the world. So why is all of a sudden an external app going to drive players who weren't previously interested in Battle Stadium into Battle Stadium? That's really been my question for Pokemon Champions the entire time. And I think we're going to see if someone who wasn't into Battle Stadium previously is into Battle Stadium. It doesn't sound like it from the opening paragraph. There's an explanation of what competitive Pokemon is. I don't think I need to explain that to you if you're watching my channel. I make pretty regular videos about Pokemon VGC, so you probably know what VGC is. If you're new here, welcome. And it also does point out that, there were bugs, and that was something that people were concerned about on release. There were some very funny issues with various different abilities, especially they mixed up a lot of the way berries work and Unnerve works and things like that. And so I'm glad they've been fixing that. They've been fixing that pretty steadily, and they are giving him credit for that. It's hard to make a brand new system perfect on release, but here's the thing. I really enjoy the combat system, even without all the catching and leveling that usually accompanies it, right? That's a big part of the appeal of this game. We don't have to spend all this time training Pokemon. So the fact this is all there, if the content isn't available at launch, wasn't so, dare I say, gloomy. So they were enjoying it, but they were concerned about the lack of content. It's just so few options. The option to fight with one Pokemon at a time or two is pretty much all you're given. It doesn't have a single player mode, doesn't have a 6v6 mode, it doesn't have a gym leader castle gauntlet, or let trainers face off against superpowered legendaries or anything that can be played offline or as a way to test your ideas. Whew, that's a lot to unpack. It's online PvP or nothing. And this is something else I mentioned in my videos. I thought that Raiden Battles was a no-brainer, smash hit, keep people playing the game type mode that they didn't include, but really it didn't need to be anything. It just needed to be a different mode other than singles or doubles. And Champions doesn't provide, so 6v6, something that I think I mentioned as well, with a lot of Smogon players really like playing. It would need an adapted timer, but again, it is really popular, as you see here. And a lot of people I know who are picking up the game for the first time. One of my friends who, engages with me on competitive Pokemon asked me how my tournaments go, but doesn't really play competitive Pokemon. He was saying, yeah, I picked up Champions, but I'm still too scared pick up doubles. I'm just going to play single battles because I'm familiar with those. And so missing out on the 6v6 mode that I think a lot of people wanted is going to hurt, especially draft players is another group of people, Smogon players who generally play 6v6. Why no single player challenges or any single player offerings? Good question. Gym Leader Gauntlet, Superpower Legendaries. We talked about Battle Frontier. I think the place is called Battle Frontier, something along those lines. So it is weird that those things are not there. We'll see if they implement those later, but I don't think so. I don't think they are. I think that's out of the scope of a game like this, even though a lot of us wanted it. disappointing lack of content also extends to Pocket Monsters themselves. It's only 186 Pokemon to battle with, and this I actually disagree with. It's saying, okay, hey, there's no legendaries. They're gonna update this, but what's available right now leaves me feeling like a Psyduck with confused and with a headache. I actually really disagree with this because 186 Pokemon to battle with is actually pretty normal for the start of a generation. Obviously, when we started out on, say, Sword and Shield or Scarlet and Violet or Sun and Moon, we felt like there were a lot more Pokemon, but that's because there were a lot of not fully evolved Pokemon. And 186 fully evolved Pokemon, with the exception of Pikachu, is actually like pretty par for the course for an early game, and we're gonna get more over time, so it's actually not that strange. I know people complain about missing their favorites, and especially the lack of items is mentioned, and here they say talk about the lack of items. I don't care. They're gonna add them later, and it's actually fun to me to play with fewer Pokemon and to add them in later. It makes sense with their monetization model, where you aren't just gonna be stuck with, because again, you could be stuck with instant Rillaboom Urshifu like we've been stuck with in BGC for the last 3 years, right? And once those Pokemon are in the game, they're stuck here. They have to. It's a lot harder to take them out of formats than put them into formats, especially if people spend money to get access to them. And so, yeah, I think that it's probably a good thing that we get to play with some of the more niche Pokemon, at least to start out, and then over time we will get access to more and more Pokemon. But it is really interesting that a more casual player is concerned about this, because I saw a lot of competitive players talking about it too, and the general consensus now is, we're okay with it. But I do think that more casual players seem to want to play with their favorites, and so when their favorites are not in the game, it does make it harder to retain them. So maybe this is a concern that is not directly related to people who are used to picking out what the best Pokemon are in a metagame and using them, finding them and using them, and less and more so for people who want to use their favorites. I'm kind of in the middle. I don't necessarily care what the best Pokemon are. I'm always trying to find unusual Pokemon to use that have a niche, and I thought this metagame is really good for that. There's a lot of fun ways to use underrated Pokemon, and there's also a really strong core of centralized 20 or so Pokemon that everyone's using. And you can find a way to fit one or two weird choices on your team, and I really like that. So I have not had a problem with that. But they are talking about the lack of items. This one I feel it feels like it's a bigger limitation, but again, not really hurting my enjoyment of the game. And I don't think that not really reading an IGN article to see how you feel about the 2025 World Championship teams. But yeah, they'll come in later. I'm not worried about that. That's a very particular design choice as compared to like a real limitation of the game to me. Are you playing Pokemon Champions? Yes, I love Pokemon battles. Wow. Okay. And then this poll is also really telling, because again, my viewer base is very different. My viewer base, I imagine, 50-60% saying I love Pokemon battles. 43% of people saying I want more than just fights from Pokemon, and 28% of people saying not right now, but maybe with more updates. To get your favorite Pokemon on your team, assuming they made the cut, you have to bring them over from a previous game or recruit them from Champions Farm. Home was painless. I agree. Home has been totally painless, importing them and bringing them back. The recruit method is, and here's the problem that I think a lot of people are talking about. You only get one free pull per day, and you can permanently add them or rent them for free. If this all makes Pokemon Champions sound like a mobile game, that's because it will be later this year. And the sense of typical mobile game, I'm interested. They have not actually really said anything about recruiting. I think one of the big complaints I heard people talk about was that they couldn't get the specific Pokemon they wanted. Again, harkening back to this part where, hey, I want to use my favorite Pokemon. Now, if you've been playing on the Switch, you probably have access to your favorite Pokemon through Pokemon Home, so it's not really a concern. But if you want to play without access to any external games, and you want to specifically use, Watchog, right? It might be hard to actually roll for that Pokemon without using a bunch of tickets. Although, having played the game a little more, that was a concern of mine. They give you so many quick tickets to re-roll that I have not had a problem finding Pokemon that I want either. So I'm not as concerned about this. They have the type of affinity tickets and the quick tickets in ample supply to be able to help you get whatever Pokemon you want. At least at the start. They haven't found themselves hindered. Without that, the beginner gifts are plentiful, as normally do. They didn't pay for the $7 starter pack. I did. I think that was pretty good use. But they haven't felt the need to pay, which is good. Which is honestly really good that a more casual player can go in free to play and not feel like they are as predatory as mobile games can be. Which I agree. Pokemon Champions, not as predatory as mobile games can be. I think sadly there is an expectation in our culture now that mobile games are predatory and incredibly predatory, and so just only a little predatory is actually pretty good. And the fact that there's no ways like to keep spending money, that you are capped on the amount of money you could spend, is actually pretty healthy, I think, all things considered, even though I think there would be some people who would really shell out for champions if they had the ability to. Here's the part that I found interesting. From a visual standpoint, this game is all about battling. Champions falls on his face harder than Brock did whenever he tried to flirt with the latest pretty face. Instead of being the stars of the show, the Pokemon lack texture and details. Moves themselves fare a bit overall, but can swing wildly in quality. For example, Hyper Beam vaporizes opponents, but Body Slam sees the user simply rise up and come back down with an idle animation. Is it so much to ask that attacks originate from somewhere that makes sense? It's 2026. It would be great if Bullet Seed didn't spawn a few feet in front of my Pokemon. I kid you not, I got so much hate. So much hate for saying this in my video. This is the thing that people got pissed off about the most. I think, and in fact, it was going to be more scathing in that video when I was scripting it out, because I saw some of the animations in the trailers and they were underwhelming. But then we saw people playing this game at PAX in the early release, and they were showing off animations of like Blizzard and Eruption and all these really powerful moves, and they looked beautiful. And I said, okay, I'm gonna tone it back with the animation criticism. But I agree, especially in the trailers, a lot of the animations did not look very compelling, and now they still don't look very compelling. Most of your moves are just direct ports from the Pokemon games, and the Pokemon themselves are also not done done in a better way. They're not. It doesn't feel like the focus was on battling. It did feel like the parts of animations that you can customize, the parts of animations that they focused on, were the parts that mattered in an RPG, where you can customize your trainer, customize how they throw the Pokeballs out, but not anything that actually happens when you're battling. And I thought, hey, I'm going to keep playing regardless. I play on Pokemon Showdown, where I don't have animations on at all, and it's just static images. I'm fine with that. Doesn't really impact my enjoyment, but it did feel like a missed opportunity. And again, they criticize this here. It would be really cool if every move felt special and every Pokemon felt special. In a game that doesn't have any other limitations except for competitive battling, it would have been cool if it felt awesome to battle, instead of feeling like you are playing essentially a slightly upgraded text simulator. Back when we used to play in 2005 on internet relay chat bots, right? Like, it's still the same thing fundamentally now. You could have made it really spruced up and really made it feel immersive, and it doesn't feel that way. That's a big ask. It's a lot more to ask, but like, if you really wanted to get a 10 out of 10 rating from IGN, and for me, I think you need that. I think you need that, the focus on what aesthetics really matter in this game and nailing those. And they really didn't. They could have upgraded every single animation if they wanted to. It takes a lot of time and effort and art, and it just shows that they don't have the manpower to be able to do something like that, so they had to pick and choose, and that's concerning for me. And that was one of the things I mentioned in that video before the game came out. The lack of manpower is concerning. The fact that they have to really pick and choose what features they want is really concerning for their ability to implement all the features that will allow for player retention. And here's one that they've also missed out on, in my opinion, and also in IGN's opinion. Yeah, obviously, a lot of the pushback was, they've never done this before, why would they do this again? And yeah, Pokemon Champions, Pokemon is not known for its looks. I didn't expect it to, but for a game all about fighting, I hope that more effort would be put into making it at least look cool. Hard pressed to find out any major tweaks. It's just the same thing. That's the thing, is it's just a direct port. It's so few upgrades, and that was the sad part to me. The training room was quite successful. By spending your VP, you're able to boost stats. Again, if you've played Champions, you're aware of all these mechanics, but I think it did do really well. They made it really easy to change stats, and even I find myself, if I have a Pokemon in Champions, I'd rather use the stat change in Champion than train one in Scarlet and Violet, even though I have all the resources in Scarlet and Violet. So well done there. They are worried about allowing players to purchase the resource directly, but they did say that you can't buy VP, and I don't think they will let you. I think they've been pretty good about this. No reason to be concerned about something that they haven't said they're going to do, and also they don't seem to be inclined to do. Pokemon Champions should have been an easy knockout, but instead Pokemon fans got stripped down, underwhelming, and content-barren package with an unfortunate monetization model. Woo, that's rough. Battling and testing your team against folks around the world is as fun as it's ever been, which is true. It's exactly as fun as it's ever been because it's the same thing. And thankfully, Champions managed to deliver on the core of what it's trying to do. It does. I've enjoyed the matches I've played, but the time spent I've mostly been making me want to hop into my saves from the main series. Champions proves that the tried and true combat system that helped define Nintendo's monolith has endured for a reason, but it's going to need a lot of updates and maybe an evolution of its two before this is the definitive way to do battle. Gonna break this down a little bit. Could have been an easy knockout, agreed. So many things, just a little more. They could have been really hook people. Again, I keep comparing this to Pokemon Live versus Pokemon Pocket for a TCG, where Live did not hook people. It was very, very bare bones. It was a simulator. Pocket hooked people. It was made to get people into the game and playing for the first time and collecting and all that stuff for a mobile game. And that this is not what this is. Instead, fans got a stripped down, 100% underwhelming. Yeah, in fact, stripped down, it is pretty much a direct port. It's not stripped down. It's just not, there's nothing added. Stripped down may be meaning to fewer Pokemon. Again, not really concerning to me. Content barren, definitely the case where it just does not have a lot of content, stuff to do. It just has battling, and you get bored of battling. I've never been a person who likes hopping on Battle Stadium and playing for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. I never do that, really. I do that for content. I practice mostly, like very focused practice. They didn't mention, obviously, open team sheets, right? I primarily am practicing for tournaments, so I'm practicing open team sheets, which they don't have in game. Not a concern for more casual players, but even then, they still acknowledge there's other content they would have liked that is not in there. And the unfortunate monetization model, which, again, sad. I agree. I liked the fact that you could buy a Switch and buy the game and have everything you needed to play. That's slowly been diminished over time. They didn't even mention Floette needing Pokemon ZA, which is one of my other criticisms that I had, is that, you know, if you are just playing on mobile or just on Switch without, for some reason, having access to all the games, you are at a disadvantage. They didn't really mention that, but yeah, I don't really mind the monetization model. It hasn't been as bad having played the game a little bit. I'm not really concerned about it, although I am a little concerned about mobile-only players who don't have access to the Switch games and what they will find about the monetization model. So we'll see how that ends up turning out when they actually release the mobile game. And then the final review is a 6 out of 10. A 6 out of 10. Pokemon Champions proves that the tried and true combat system that helped define Nintendo's monster catching monolith has endured for a reason, but it's going to need a lot of updates or an evolution of its own before this is the definitive way to do battle. And I hope you guys know 6 out of 10 doesn't sound bad. 6 out of 10 by IGN standards is fucking scathing. Here is their lowest reviewed Switch 2 games, right? They have 3 games on Switch 2 since its release that have gotten below a 6 out of 10, and one of them is the Welcome Tour, right? They don't do reviews lower than 5. They might as well. This is basically a 2 out of 5 from IGN is really what it is, which is rough. They really didn't like it, and all of quite frankly, their concerns are valid. There are concerns that I have been talking about and I agree with, and it's a shame. I really do think it's a shame that content barren. That's what it is. There's just not enough to do in this game, because there are some types of people who do really like just hopping on Battle Stadium and laddering for hours and hours on end. But if you want this game to really compel both players who are, even me, players who are competitive, but not competitive in a way where you want to sit down and grind for hours and want to mix it up, people who like Smogon and draft leagues and all the other ways to engage with competitive Pokemon that again really like to mix it up, would like to be able to play on this platform, just really cannot in their preferred way. People who are more casual and want single player modes or want to use their favorite Pokemon. It's just like, it feels like it's missing a lot. It feels like it had a lot of different ways that it could sprout and take control of its own destiny and say, we are reimagining competitive Pokemon and we are going to add in this feature that allows you to experience competitive Pokemon in a new way, or even just make it look really cool. And they kind of failed to do all of that. I've been hesitant to do another video kind of reviewing Pokemon Champions because I've got mixed feelings, and because regardless, I'm not going to put it down. I'm going to keep playing it, and I have had fun playing it, but I have also felt a lot of these criticisms as well. Underwhelming and content barren is exactly how I would describe it. And I don't want to say I'm glad to see that another like independent outlet feels that way as well, because I would have liked it if they didn't and they loved it. But I think that when some of the biggest outlets in video game media are calling your game underwhelming and content barren, I hope that's a real wake-up call to Pokemon, and I hope that they, at least before mobile launches, because this is like the soft launch, right? This is the alpha, or the beta, really. And then when mobile comes out and way more people have access to the game, that's when retention really matters. That's when then the question is, can you hold on to these people who don't own a Switch, who don't engage with Pokemon nearly as much as people who play Scarlet and Violet, play Legends ZA, play, like, maybe they'll play Pokemon Go. Can you hang on to those people? And I think that if the game is still underwhelming and content barren when mobile release comes out, we might have a real problem. Not to be too much of a doomer, but this ain't good, man. This ain't good. Cross your fingers. I'm optimistic. I still really do believe that they're gonna right the ship, but 6 out of 10. That's rough.